Welcome to another episode of Frankly Speaking Sports. I'm your host, Larry Frank, and a happy Monday to you all. You know, it's been a very crazy weekend. A lot going on in the world, a lot going on in our nation. And, I want to first of all make sure, obviously, the topic of the week has to be, unfortunately, the George Floyd situation that is going on and the injustice that was done. And, it's a very difficult, I don't know if it's a very difficult topic, but I've been thinking about what do I say? What do I do? How can I make things right? How can I make people more comfortable? And I'm just trying to figure out other ways. Do I say anything, or am I better off saying nothing at all? And, after thinking about it for a couple of days now, I think I would be doing a dissatisfaction if I don't say anything. And first of all, before we even get started on this, as far as George Floyd goes, I want to send all my prayers out to his friends, families, relatives, anybody in any way that has been, affected by this terrible incident that happened in Minneapolis. And, I am praying that, the people in Minnesota get this right and, do what is necessary to these 4 officers that were involved. And there is no doubt about the wrong that was done here. And I don't think anybody is questioning that. But we're at a time in our society where this crap should not still be going on. It was, I believe, 50 years ago, Martin Luther King Jr.'s famous speech that said, I have a dream that one day all of God's children, black men, white men, Jews and Gentiles, Protestant and Catholics, will all be able to join hands and sing in the words of the Negroid spiritual. Free at last, thank God Almighty, I'm free at last. And it is now 50 years later, and we're still having issues with this. I do not understand how we can be so foolish and so disrespectful to one another. My goodness, we are all the same. Why is it so difficult for people just to see that it is a color of a skin? There is no difference between a white man and a black man, or a white woman and a black woman. We are the same. We are human beings. We are built the same way. This is ridiculous. And I go about and I say to myself, well, Larry, you're not one of these big podcasters that are coming out and, does this huge show that is seen by millions of other people like some of these bigger shows. But I do have a platform. And if I can affect one person to justify what is right and what is wrong, I believe I am doing a good service. And, it just amazes me. And we look back in history, and all of us at first, right now everyone's saying, Larry, people are looting, they're burning, and they're doing this, destroying. It's wrong, Larry. Well, it is wrong, but I understand. Even though I do not agree with the burning down of your own home, your own businesses, the looting of people that I do not agree with that, but I understand. Every other platform that is trying to be used to get this message out has not been working. It's like boiling water. You can keep boiling it. And eventually, if you don't turn it off and stop it, it's going to boil over. And that's what's happening right now. There is no justice in what is going on right now in this world. And it's not fair. And, everybody's talking about, Colin Kaepernick does not look bad right now, does he? I don't necessarily agree with Colin about the way he did it and I think where the message with Colin was misinterpreted was that it was done during the national anthem. And in a country where we really respect our military, it looked like a disrespect towards the military rather than the message he was trying to get out. And I blame part of that on the NFL. I really do, because the NFL had an opportunity to sit down with Colin and say, what's wrong? Explain your message to us. Explain why other people are kneeling, rather than just saying, making them look bad because they were doing it during the national anthem. We understand that it was a bad look to be doing it, and we perceived it as disrespect towards the military, when we should have rather said, Colin, explain to us. What is bothering you? What are you trying to say? What is your message? And some of this might have been, and some of it might not have been, alleviated. But we should have listened. And we didn't. We didn't. And I think, justice needs to be served here. But as far as racism goes, it's a terrible thing. I've said this before. There is no place in our society for racism, and penalties should be strict. Not just in professional sports, but hate crimes have to have major consequences so people don't do this again. Here is a man that killed a black man, stuck his knee on his neck, I believe they said for over 7 minutes. I'm not sure exactly how many minutes it was, but I know it was over 7 minutes. That is murder. That's not third-degree murder. That is major murder. And some people will say it should be dealt with the death penalty. And this is a guy that has had a record before. So there is no justice in this. But as far as racism goes in this world, we need to come together as one. We need to use every single platform. And I challenge everybody out there that has a platform, which everybody has a platform, to utilize that platform to stop racism in America. And a lot of my peers in this business, in the sports show business, in the sports host business, in the podcast business, and so on, they need to step up to the plate. Okay? I'm going to tell you right now, and I don't mean this in a bad way, but racism isn't going to stop just because black people say it needs to stop. Our black friends need our help. Okay, I have many black friends out there, and I would do whatever I have to do for them to make this racism goes away. They need our help. The black people need the white people's help, and the white people need the black people's help. We need each other's help. We will never, ever conquer racism working apart. This is something that needs to be worked together. And it's not going to stop. It is sickening and nauseating to me to know that somebody can just hate another person because the color of their skin. It is wrong. It is wrong, and it is wrong. I can never understand it. I thank goodness and thank God my mom and dad were not racist people. They taught us to grow up and to treat everybody the same exact way. And I am so glad they did. And for these people, and we need to stop this. When we're out there and we hear people talking negatively about another race or another color, you need to disassociate yourself with those people. You need to get away from those people. Those people do not deserve a spot in your life. And together we need to. There is no doubt about it. Listen to the message here, okay? I understand the looting is wrong. I understand the burning is wrong. But there is a message to be heard. And this is what happens when you get the media showing all this looting and all this burning. They are missing the message. Now the message in America's eyes goes, all these individuals, whether they're white or black, they're looting. You know, what are they doing? They're ruining the nation. They're ruining it. No, they have a message, and nobody is listening to that message, so they're confining themselves to do whatever is necessary out of frustration to get people to listen. And I'm not going to sit here and tell you whether we got the right leader in the White House right now that would lead them through this, because I don't know if I've heard anything all weekend from that leader. So that's a whole nother story for somebody else to discuss. But I want to say in closing that we need to come together as one. Our black friends, male and female, need our help. They need the white people's help, and they deserve the white people's help in this matter. I cannot look at anyone out there. I cannot say it on the air that I know what it is like to be black, because I don't. I have never been black. I will never, ever be in their shoes. I can talk to people in my family that I have black relatives and discuss it with them. I can talk to my friends and discuss it with them, but I still will never understand what it feels like. But together, as one nation, as one unified people, we need to stop separating and stereotyping white people and black people. And we need to stop that immediately. And I challenge the great sportscasters out there. Let's not talk about people being the great white hope, or the great black quarterback, or the great black coach. Why can't we just go out there and say they're a great coach, they're a great player, they're a great quarterback? It needs to stop. And starting today, we need to unify ourselves as one. And why the heck we've been having trouble doing this, I do not know. I always thought of everybody as one. But obviously, there are people in this nation that are still having trouble understanding that this is the year 2020. And I'm sorry, but those people that are prejudiced, that believe in racism, we need to start eliminating those people one by one. And I'm not saying you gotta kill them, but you need to get them out of your life and disassociate yourself with those people. There is, once again, no place for racism anywhere in this world. We'll be back right after this.
Commitment in trying to make it happen in your life is not going to happen. A lot of people talk about, I want to be a success. They talk. They chatter, but they don't have the commitment in here, in your heart, a commitment and a drive to make it happen. Yes, if you're not committed 100%, pursue that goal or dream, it will not happen. So it's all up to you to make sure that you have the commitment and you have that drive and desire to want to achieve what you're setting out as your goal. Yes, you can make it happen. You can make that thing become something very successful and get the achievement that you'd like. But it all starts with commitment in the heart, the drive, and the desire.
Welcome back to Frankly Speaking Sports. I'm your host, Larry Frank. Want to remind you, we're just a couple of moments away from having Tim Britton, who covers the New York Mets for the Athletics, on, and lots of questions with this Major League proposal. If you haven't heard, yesterday the players came back with a proposal, and we'll talk to Tim about that, and we'll talk a little bit later on the show about that as well. Ladies and gentlemen, at this time it is my great honor and pleasure to introduce to you a gentleman who covers the New York Mets for the Athletics. Please welcome Tim Britton. Tim, how you doing today?
Pretty good, Larry. How are you?
I am doing great, Tim. Doing great. Hey, Tim, I want to ask you a question right off the bat here. I know Major League Baseball players yesterday came out with a counter proposal to the owners, and at a time where, crazy things, unfortunately, are going on in our nation right now, do you look at this as, a lot of people are starting to say that baseball is tarnishing its name with this bickering back and forth? What is your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, no one wants to see, fans in general don't want to hear about labor arguments back and forth at any point in time. They just want to enjoy watching the sports they like. And especially at a time like this, you've got a global pandemic, you've got obviously protests around the country now. This is not the argument that people want to hear about at this time. I think baseball has a lot at stake here. There are obviously hurdles to getting back to play from a medical or a health perspective over the next couple of weeks and maybe months. But no one wants this sport to be delayed by financial bickering, like you said, between the two sides, when clearly it is a battle between people making 6, 7, 8 figures on the player side and owners with organizations that are worth billions of dollars.
Right, and this proposal comes down yesterday, and the players have said their proposal included 114 games, I believe, from the end of June to the end of October, 2 years of expanded playoffs, $100 million of deferred money. But the one that got me was the opt-out for all players if they don't want to play. I mean, and this one gets me a little bit, and believe me, I've been on the players' side the whole time. I think the owners, are just very greedy, and that's, of course, just my opinion. But I saw this one phrase about opting out, and what business in their right mind is going to right now go out there that is reopening and say, if you don't want to work this year, don't worry, come back next year and we'll keep you?
Yeah, so I think part of that is, players who are in high-risk situations, players who might have pre-existing conditions or some sort of immunosuppressed in any way, or have close family members who are in that situation, they'd be able to opt out and get paid and earn service time. Whereas then, if a player who didn't have those conditions, who wasn't at an elevated risk for coming back, if they didn't want to play, then they would forfeit the money that they would make this year. They would still earn the service time, but they would forfeit earnings. I think it speaks to some fears that players have. Some people have compared getting baseball back now to, they played during World War II. The difference there is, World War II was happening in the Pacific. It was happening overseas. It wasn't a contagious thing happening in the contiguous United States at the same level. Players playing during that time weren't putting themselves at risk in the way players might be this year. So I think I understand the impulse for players that maybe some won't want to play, especially if their earnings are cut in any way. But I think, in the same vein that the owner's initial proposal was asking for everything the owners want, the players saw that and said, okay, we're going to have our initial proposal be everything that we want, and we'll both start out from our extreme positions and see if we can meet somewhere in the middle.
Now, we are talking to Tim Britton, covers the New York Mets for the Athletics. Tim, let's say the season goes ahead, it starts. Originally, everyone's talking about starting with no fans, and, it made the most sense not to start with fans in the stands, but as we get further and further along and these players and owners keep bickering more and more, and as the season being delayed more and more, you're starting to hear a little bit about certain states now opening up the capacity for numbers of fans that are allowed in stadiums. The latest one being Texas, which now says at sporting events for the Houston Astros and the Texas Rangers, that they are allowed to full 25% of the stadium. Do you see possibly that playing an effect now in Major League Baseball, and that there might be fans in the stands?
I think one of the interesting dynamics you'll see at that point is what happens when, like you said, different areas of the country are more willing to allow fans in the stadiums than others. Does Major League Baseball want to have a blanket policy, no fans anywhere unless there are fans everywhere? Or is it willing to go piecemeal and say, okay, if Houston and Arlington want to host fans at a certain capacity limit, that's fine. And then how do you split up the revenue from that? That's the conversation the owners have to have within themselves to determine if that's worthwhile. If they're willing, if you're the owner of the Astros, and if you're Jim Crane and you've got the go-ahead to allow 25% of fans in, do you want to keep all that gate yourself? Or do you want to be able to split part of that with the rest of the league? That's an argument that will probably be had within ownership, especially the later we get into this. If we get into, I think, as we get later into the summer and hopefully things improve physically and medically across the country, and you get maybe college football games opening up with fans in the stands, again, not full capacity, but some percentage, then maybe you see baseball start to move in that direction as well.
Now, Tim, before we get into the New York Mets, I want to ask you a question. A lot of these different states, like you mentioned, I know like Florida for one, and a couple other states, they're opening up their facilities to a certain amount of players. As far as the New York Mets and the New York Yankees go, what's the status up there in New York about them opening up the facilities?
Yeah, so, within the last, I think, week or 10 days, Governor Andrew Cuomo in New York said that the state is willing to host a professional sporting event and would be willing to open up training facilities, whether it's Citi Field or Yankee Stadium. Both the Mets and Yankees have said, however, that they would prefer to start their, a second spring training down in Florida at their spring training facilities. The Mets are in Port St. Lucie, the Yankees are in Tampa. Neither has said exactly why. I think the numbers are different in Florida than they are in New York. And, obviously the COVID-19 has hit different areas of the country harder than others. New York is certainly among the hardest hit, if not the hardest hit in the U.S. And that's probably playing a factor. And also, it is still easier to train a larger number of players at your spring training facility than at your major league facility, which has one field rather than like 8 or 9, the way you do at a spring training site.
We're talking to Tim Britton, covers the New York Mets for the Athletics. Going towards the New York Mets now, let's go as if there is a season right now. Obviously, the big news out of the Mets spring training camp was the going down of Noah Syndergaard with the Tommy John surgery. Even with that injury, when you look at this Mets starting pitching staff with Porcello and Watkins, DeGrom and Mets, I mean, it's not a bad starting pitching staff, is it?
Yeah, this is a team that for the last 5 or 10 years, really going back to the World Series trip they made in 2015, has been built around its starting pitching staff. And even though they lost Zach Wheeler in free agency, they made the trade last July for Marcus Stroman with the idea that he would be able to fill in for Wheeler once he was gone in free agency. You've got DeGrom at the top. You're starting off in as good a spot as any rotation in baseball. The loss of Syndergaard hurts you a lot behind him as your number 2, and it hurts kind of the depth of that rotation. Stroman is, I think, a pretty good number 2 starter, but beyond that, Matt, Waka, and Porcello. Watkins and Porcello are each coming off down years for them, but they've been good lately. They've both been all-stars. Porcello won a Cy Young in 2016, and Matt has been a more reliable option, health-wise the last couple of years. Early in his career, he was very good when he pitched, but he didn't pitch a whole lot. The last 2 years, he's been pretty good when he pitches, but he's pitched a lot more consistently. I think those 3 guys are kind of number 4, number 5 starters. It was really nice when they were in spring training and they had those 5 guys, along with Syndergaard. You really felt good about the depth they had 1 through 6. Now it's a shortened depth, and if we're trying to pack a lot of games into a short amount of time, you might need 6 starters more routinely than you would in a normal season. They might not be in as good shape as they would have been earlier in the year before the Syndergaard injury.
And that leads right into my next question, Tim, because you made a great point about it's going to be an abbreviated season, obviously. The season, let's just say hypothetically, they're planning on, beginning of July, end of June. These pitches are not going to be necessarily going those 5, 6, 7, 8 innings that they may be accustomed to during the normal July part of the season. So I think a lot of weight I would say at least at the beginning of the year, could it be where a lot of the weight is going to rely on that bullpen, and then maybe later on as the season moves on, you're going to, where you usually want to rest more of your arms, now they're going to be up to the capabilities of pitching longer.
Yeah, it'll be an interesting dynamic because, like you said, at the start, you're not going to be seeing guys go as deep into games as we're used to. This break has been difficult for everyone. Within baseball, it's especially hard, I think, on pitchers because they were ramping up, and the reason spring training is 6.5 weeks long normally is because pitchers need to go from zero to being ready to throw 7 innings on opening day, starting pitchers. And now that routine has been kind of halved, and they've got to kind of stay kind of ready, but also they don't want to throw too much this time of the year because they don't know when the sport is coming back. It's been really uncertain for them. And so I think we'll see when, you have another 2.5 to 3 week spring training, you go into a season, starting pitchers will probably be going, maybe 4 or 5 innings the first time or two through the rotation and be relying on your bullpen. You'll have fewer off days, really regardless. You look at the two proposals. The owner's proposal is, I think, 82 games in 90 days. The player's proposal is 114 games in 124 days. There's not a lot of days off built into either of those schedules. So you're going to be relying on your depth, especially at that point in the season. But then you're right, when you get to the end of the year, a lot of times you're talking about pitchers who have thrown for 7 months into the postseason and they're reaching their 240th, 250th inning of the year. It really wears on you. I know Porcello is a guy who's been in the playoffs a lot and has talked about, you count on throwing 200 innings in a season, and then you throw 230 because you were in the playoffs. That takes its toll on you the next season. You don't pitch as well at the end of the season either. So you'll have guys kind of hitting their stride in October or November, whenever the playoffs happen. And maybe you can lean on your star pitchers a way that teams always want to, but not necessarily can. That time of year, see kind of the Madison Bumgarner type postseason from your best pitchers, if that's the case.
Now, how competitive can this lineup be 1 through 8 with all the other teams in the major leagues?
Yeah, I think this is as good an offensive lineup as the Mets have had in some time. Obviously, the last year and a half, the emergences of Pete Alonso and Jeff McNeil, in June of 2018, these two guys were in AAA. Beginning of 2018, they're both in AA. And now they're Major League All-Stars and kind of centerpieces of this offense moving forward for different reasons. Alonso, obviously, the power coming off a 53-homer season. McNeil's hit over 320 in his first year and a half in the Major League. So those two are kind of the central pieces in that lineup, and then you fill in around them. You've got Michael Conforto, who had a 30-home run season last year. You've got Brandon Nimmo, who had a 400 on-base percentage in 2018 before suffering an injury that knocked him out a lot of 2019. You've got the pieces around these guys to have a deeper lineup than they've had in quite some time. Even the 2015 team that went to the World Series, certainly the offense didn't look this way at the start of the season, and even at the end of the year. That's getting new and assessment. That's when the lineup looked a bit deeper. And Cespedes, if there is a universal designated hitter, which I think most people assume there will be this year, becomes a potential factor in a way that he wouldn't be if he had to play the field. He hasn't played in the majors since the middle of 2018, but coming off of heel and ankle surgeries. But if he just has to hit, that's something he can still do. So I think this line offensively is probably is up in the upper half, maybe top 5 of the National League. It's probably the second best in the National League East, behind only Atlanta. It isn't quite as strong defensively, and I think that's something that we tend to overlook when we look at lineups. And that's been a flaw that the Mets have had for quite some time. But I do think this is as good a position player group as the Mets have had maybe in a decade or more.
Now, obviously, with Beltran gone, they decided to go with Luis Rojas. He's been around the Mets organization for a long time. He's highly regarded. What type of individual, what type of coach are these players getting in him?
Yeah, in Luis Rojas, they're getting someone that they know, which I think was really important given the uncertainty of this past offseason. You know, you hire Carlos Beltran, and Luis Rojas was a candidate at the time that they hired Beltran. I think Beltran was a bigger name, a guy who had kind of instant credibility with the players and with the fan base because of his time in New York. Credibility that maybe he lost because of everything that came out about his role in the Astros sign stealing scandal. With Rojas, he's a guy who's got managerial experience. He's been managing in the minor leagues for a decade in the Mets organization. So he's managed, you know, if you're looking at the guys who would be on the Mets active roster this year, at least half of them have been managed by Luis Rojas before. He's got a kind of a calm, steadying presence. I've heard from players, though, that he knows when to amp it up a little bit for you. So, you know, it's always going to be difficult when your first major league season as a manager was going to be difficult for Beltran if that were the case. I think the biggest step for Rojas will be dealing with a media crunch, and certainly it will be a different type of media crunch this year than it would be in a normal year. But when he was hired, I talked to some guys who had similar kind of resumes going in. You know, Brady Little in Boston had forever been a long-time minor league manager, gets the job in Boston, and you know, you're not in the minor leagues. You're not having every decision you make analyzed and evaluated by 8 different writers after the game. You have to have a reason for everything, and that's the biggest change about being a major league manager. And I think Rojas, you know, his father was Felipe Alou, a longtime manager with the Expos and Giants. I think he's been groomed for this for a while, and I think he's in a good spot, you know, if we do get baseball this year, to make an impact.
Yeah, and you know, it feels like to me probably since David Wright has been gone, and I'm talking about the last couple of years, even when he wasn't playing, but he was still a member of the team, the Mets had a void. They had that void in some leadership presence on that team. And now when you look at this guy, Pete Alonso, amazing year, I mean, unbelievable year just to watch last year. Talk about how special this guy is and what your expectation is for him going further.
Yeah, I mean, I think anyone who watches baseball can see how special he is on the field. The power is ridiculous. You know, I think some people will take away from the 53 home runs he hit last year and say, well, the ball was different. Everyone hit a lot more home runs. But you watch Alonso, and his home runs are not the kind that are sneaking over the fence. He hit some of the longest home runs I've ever seen. I think in addition to that, you know, there are guys who have just power. We saw more of an approach from him. Even early in the season, there was kind of more of an advanced two-strike plate approach at various junctures that impressed you about a rookie. You don't see that all the time from a guy just coming up, especially one known more for how far he hits the ball. And then I think off the field, you get really a sense of, we say it all the time as writers or when I'm doing my own podcast, that Pete Alonso gets it. He's a guy who understands what his role can be as a big-time baseball player in the city of New York. He embraces being a New York Met, which not everyone always does in this city. And he knows he's trying to use his platform in a positive fashion. And that's really refreshing, really nice to see. You know, you never know how long that lasts. Guys can get tired of that. It's training to do that as a player. But for now, and the first couple of years of his career, it's been really impressive to watch up close. He's one of the nicest and most fun guys on the team to talk to. And just hope that continues moving forward.
We're talking to Tim Britton. He covers the Mets for the Athletics. Just a couple more questions and we'll let you run here, Tim. For those people this year that are going to be watching the New York Mets, who is the one player that comes to your mind that people should really look out for this year?
You know, I think if you want to know kind of an X factor for who might determine how good the Mets are this year, I think it's probably Ahmed Rosario at shortstop. This is a guy who, when he came up in the middle of the 2017 season, was generally regarded as one of the top 5 prospects in the game. You know, when he was a shortstop in the Eastern League, he was compared favorably to Francisco Lindor, who has really taken off with the Indians since being in the major leagues. Rosario is big major league level. He's struggled with his strike zone command. He struggled with just his overall offense numbers. And then last year, he really struggled defensively in the field, especially at the start of the year, to the point that they were considering moving him off shortstop, maybe putting him in the outfield. But the last 3.5, 4 months of last season, the average was over 300. His OPS was over 800. His defense steadied. It wasn't great, but it was about league average from mid-May on. So you started to see the potential ceiling that he has as a player, a guy who can be an offensive force at a premium position. That's a really valuable thing to have. This is a guy who, when he was coming into the major leagues, people thought he might be an MVP candidate someday. And while I'm not willing to put that on him right now, you can start to see why he can make an impact in so many different phases of the game during that second half of last season. So if he's able to carry that over, this is a guy who's probably slated to hit 8th in the line, I guess 9th if you've got a DH in the lineup coming into the season. But if he puts together the season he was having in the second half last year over a full year, well, that's really a guy who can be really valuable for you and have kind of a bigger breakout potential than maybe anyone else on this roster.
Now, Tim, you mentioned the DH, and I'm glad you did. As everybody knows, the DH may be, and it looks like it will be, implemented this year in both leagues. This helps the Mets, don't it?
Yeah, as I wrote about them, the Mets seem like they've been preparing for this moment for years because they've had so many guys on their team who would be pretty good DHs. It's just that they're not great in the field. Cespedes is kind of the main guy right now because of the physical toll that he's had over the last couple of years. Surgeries on both fields, surgeries on an ankle. He last played in the game in July of 2018. So in spring training, you saw him taking live cuts, taking live batting practice, and looking pretty good, looking a lot like his old self. So the question was always going to be, can he actually play left field on a regular basis? We didn't get a chance to see him out there that first part of spring training. Now, if he just has to go to the plate, he's got a much bigger, much better chance of being a productive player for them this year. And even if it doesn't work out for him, he's got other guys behind him. J.D. Davis is a guy who's kind of got a DH profile, a professional at bat without really a home in the field. They've talked about playing him in left field. Dominic Smith is kind of the same way. So, he can play first base, so maybe you put Smith at first, where he's a strong defensive player, and you can DH Alonso on some days. Robinson Cano and Jeff Lowry are two infielders there on the wrong side of 35. Lowry is coming off his own knee issues. Maybe those are guys who can get some DH at bats. Maybe not everyday basis, but guys you give some time off to in the field. So they've got plenty of options to go to if they wanted to in that role. Maybe probably more than your average National League team these days.
All right, Tim, last question. Does this team have enough to contend?
Yeah, I think coming in, let's say you're asking me this question on February 10th when I'm going down to the original spring training, I would have said yes. I think they were a team that probably would have been right in line. I don't think they're as good as Atlanta in the National League East. I think the Syndergaard injury probably takes them behind Washington in the NL East, and maybe just a little bit ahead of Philadelphia. But I would have thought this was a team that over the course of 162 could have won about 86, 87, 88 games. Syndergaard injury takes it a little lower than that. But, would be right in there for the first or second wild card in the National League. Now that we're talking about the possibility of expanded playoffs, that does seem to be one thing that owners and players do agree on. The idea of maybe having 7 playoff teams per league rather than 5. I think the Mets would be a team that really capitalizes on that. They're a team that's right there in that 5th, 6th, 7th spot in the National League. I think just talent-wise, looking at the start of whatever season we have here. But I think they're a team that really should make the playoffs if it is a 7-team field. I think it'd be a disappointment for the fan base and for the front office if they weren't able to get in that top half of the National League.
All right, Tim, we want to thank you so much for joining us today on Frankly Speaking Sports. I really, really enjoyed having you, and I do appreciate it.
Oh, anytime. Thank you.
All right, Tim, be safe.
You too. Thanks a lot.
That was Tim Britton. He covers the New York Mets for the Athletics. We'll be back right after this. Welcome back to Frankly Speaking Sports. I want to remind you all, You can join the fastest growing Facebook group and get all of our podcasts, all of our interviews right on that Facebook group page. It's called Frankly Speaking Sports. If you're not a member yet, join. If you have friends, relatives that are interested in the most updated sports news and some great interviews, have them join as well. Also, I want to remind you, you can follow us on Twitter at Larry Frankus. That's with the US at the end. If you have a Twitter account, go ahead and follow it. And then let's not forget our newest channel, our YouTube channel called Frankly Speaking Sports. Guys, this is terrific. You can go to YouTube, go to our sports channel, like I said, Frankly Speaking Sports. You go ahead and you subscribe. It's free. And for free, you get all of our podcasts going forward, as well as all the interviews that we do. So some great interviews, some great sports information, some great sports news, all for free. So you definitely want to go ahead and join that. Also, you can watch in front of your TV. Yeah, if you have a smart TV, you just go to YouTube, you type in Frankly Speaking Sports, you'll see a picture of all our interviews, all our podcasts. You can sit in front of your TV and listen to the audio through your TV of Frankly Speaking Sports podcasts and interviews. Incredible way to live, folks. I thought it was a great conversation, as I always do with all my guests, with Tim Britton, who covers the New York Mets for the Athletics. And, we talked about the proposal among a lot of other things. And, like I said, the Major League Baseball owners are going to have trouble. They don't want, for some reason, a 114-game season for whatever reason it is. They want an 80-game schedule. Number two, they want to defer contracts. Of course they do. They want to have prorated contracts based on the amount of games they play. So, it's going to be they haven't rejected the offer yet. The only thing I really don't like what the players said, and I mentioned it to Tim during our interview with him when he was on the show, is about this opt-out for all players if they don't want to play. Now, let me explain this to you. If a player has a certain scenario where they are more receptive to contract the virus, that I understand. If they have somebody home who has contracted the virus and needs their support as far as being there, that I understand. That is completely different. There's a difference between not wanting to play and not being able to play. In those cases, not being able to play because you have a certain situation like a respiratory issue with asthma or something that you're more susceptible to get this illness that is going around in COVID-19. But for players just to decide, I don't want to play, I don't think they should be allowed back in the league. And once again, I'm on the player's side. But what business can you say without one of those exceptional cases that I just talked about? Can you go in every day and just say, hey, I don't plan on working here. I won't come back till next week or next year? No. We'll get other players to fill your spot. But once again, I do want to emphasize, if there is a situation where you have somebody in your family that has contracted the illness and, you want to be near their side while they go through it, or a situation where you're opening it up to a greater risk because of, health situation that you may have had in the past, that I completely understand, and I can understand you not wanting to play. But just not playing for the sake of playing, I don't believe in that. I just don't believe in that. Now, yesterday there was some sports news. We had NASCAR. If you didn't see it, it ended up being a terrific race down to the wire, and it ended up with Brad Keselowski winning the race. He came in first place, and the top five ended up Boyer, Johnson, Busch, and Jones. So those were the top five. And if you look down, I'm going to look down and see some of the notables. Dillon was 6th. The other Bush was 7th. Harwick finished 11th, which I think might have been his worst finish so far this year. I mean, since the return of NASCAR. Nemechek was 13th, Newman 15th. Matt Kenseth was 16th, Hamlin 17th. Then you see Truex on 20th, Logano 21. Looking to see, unfortunately, Reddick did not finish the race. He's a guy I've been very high on, the rookie that has had a tremendous run the first couple of races here. But Blaney and Bowman didn't finish. So otherwise, I just wanted to make sure we did mention that the race yesterday was at Bristol Motor Speedway. And, I had trouble watching that race. I'll tell you why. I am not a short track fan. I have never been. Nothing against it. And I know there's a lot of skill involved in short track racing, but I'm more for the Talladegas, the Darlingtons, the Daytonas, where the racing is wide open and you can go a lot faster. It just seems more like racing to me. But otherwise, it was a great race yesterday, and we like to go ahead and congratulate Brad Keselowski for winning another race. I want to remind all of you that if you have any comments, concerns, or topics you want to talk about any of the things we discussed earlier in this program, any things we'll discuss in the future, or that you would like us to discuss in the future, you can go to franklyspeaking528@gmail.com. But if you want to even make it easier, there's easier ways. You can leave a message right at the end of this podcast. It's a voice message. I'll get it. We'll use it on our next episode of Frankly Speaking Sports. And I know we just mentioned recently about our Facebook page, Frankly Speaking Sports. You can leave a message there, as well as on our YouTube channel at Frankly Speaking Sports, and at our Twitter account at Larry Frankus. And I encourage all of you, even if you're a member of our Facebook group, Frankly Speaking Sports, which is growing at a rapid rate, join our other venues too. Just amazing stuff on YouTube. It's free. You subscribe. Amazing stuff. We retweet a lot of stuff on our Twitter feed. So when we get information from the great Adam Schefter or Adam Wojnarowski or Buster Only or Jay Glazer or Tom Pelissaro, all these guys, we go ahead and, if we think it's important information, which not that it isn't, and everything they do is important, but, that is needed for you to know, we retweet it back out, as well as put it on our Facebook page. So please join all our different venues. We'd love to have you. Invite your friends. We want to keep growing. We want to keep making a difference in this world. And anything we can do to help you out, and no matter what the situation is, because there are a lot of difficulties, as we know, and as we spoke about earlier, going on in this world right now, and a lot of wrong things going on as well. We want to be able to share that. We have a platform that we are able to use. And remember, it only takes, it takes a whole world to go ahead and change things, but it has to start with the number one. Has to start with you. Has to start with me. And then we have to continue to pass that on. And at Frankly Speaking Sports, we support everyone. We don't care what the color of your skin is. We don't care what your ethnic background is. We don't care what your religion is. We talk about sports. If you like sports, this is a channel for you. Doesn't matter where you come from or who you are. And we want to make sure that's very clear. I want to thank you all so very much for joining us today. Tomorrow, we have another great guest. Actually, we are booked all throughout the week this week. with certain guests from the California Angels to the Orlando Magic. We are just booked. I think we have an NHL representative coming on. And as we can get 2 people a day on, we'll try to get 2 people a day on so we can continue during a time where there's not really a lot of sports going on, except maybe NASCAR, maybe UCF once in a while. We're still able to bring you some great interviews. Ladies and gentlemen, once again, thank you so much for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you again tomorrow on Frankly Speaking Sports.